My uncle once told me straight to my face, "You've always been the black sheep of this family." My aunt laughed and added, "Even her kid won't turn out right." But then, at a holiday dinner, surrounded by roast turkey and fake smiles, my 9-year-old daughter stood on a chair and said, "Actually, I'm the one who got accepted into their fancy school, not their kids." The whole table went quiet. Their smiles disappeared instantly. I didn't plan on making a scene. I never do. I've spent years learning how to shrink myself at family gatherings, say the polite things, bring the dessert, laugh at jokes I don't think are funny, because it's easier, because it's expected. My name's Nina Blake. I'm 37, a single mom, a full-time library assistant, and part-time freelance editor. I live in a little house at the edge of a small Pennsylvania town. It's not glamorous, but it's peaceful, mostly. My family? Well, they'd tell you they're tight-knit, respectable, successful. They'd also tell you I've always been a little different. That's their way of saying they don't get me, and never really tried. I was the youngest of 3, the artsy one, the sensitive one. I got married young, divorced younger, and had my daughter Lena when I was 28. To them, that was the final proof that I didn't belong. Uncle Raymond, my dad's older brother, is the loudest voice at every table, owns a car dealership, wears gold cufflinks at dinner, and doesn't understand why anyone would choose books over business. Aunt Celeste, my mom's sister, runs a wellness blog that's mostly just thinly veiled judgment in soft pastel fonts. Her favorite hobby? Comparing everyone's kids. Her granddaughter, Eva, is in gymnastics. Her son's little boy, Miles, plays cello. She'll remind you. Every 5 minutes. And then there's me and Lena. Lena is my entire world. She's quiet, curious, thoughtful. The kind of child who notices when a classmate forgets their gloves and gives them her own. She writes stories in spiral notebooks. She draws these incredible fantasy creatures with wings and lanterns in their bellies. She loves learning, not for grades, but because it matters to her. But my family doesn't see that. To them, she's just my kid. The kid of the black sheep. And so, by default, she's not worth paying attention to. They've never asked her what she's interested in, never asked me what we've been working on. We've been quietly applying to schools for months, real ones, dream schools, scholarships, essay contests, weekend programs, and they didn't know because they never cared to ask. Thanksgiving was supposed to be quiet. I brought my apple pie. Lena wore the dress she picked out herself, this soft yellow one with daisies. I told her we'd smile, be kind, and get through it, just like always. But this time, something was different. They were already halfway through the first round of wine when the comments started. It was the usual, subtle digs about parenting, polite smirks about some people's choices. And then Aunt Celeste turned to me, fork in hand, fake concern on her face, and said, "So Nina, what's Lena up to these days? Still homeschooled and drawing her little cartoons? That's so sweet." I nodded. I smiled. My stomach flipped. I reached for my water, trying to change the subject. Then Uncle Raymond chuckled. "She's always been the black sheep. But hey, we can't all be winners. Let's just hope the kid does better, huh?" I don't know what made Lena do it. Maybe she saw the way I swallowed my words. Maybe she'd had enough of being looked down on. But that's when she pushed back her chair, stood on it, and said the one thing that changed everything. I've always known I didn't fit into my family. It wasn't a sudden realization. It was something I felt in small moments. Quiet, cold glances during dinner, polite smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes, questions that were never really questions. They never came right out and said, "You don't belong." But they didn't have to. I was the one who loved books more than basketball, music more than math. The one who painted her bedroom walls with poetry in high school and got grounded for it. The one who left college after my first year, not because I wasn't capable, but because I was pregnant and scared, and nobody in my family asked if I was okay. They just asked how I could have been so stupid. After that, I stopped explaining myself. My parents moved to Florida a few years ago, leaving the holiday baton to Uncle Raymond and Aunt Celeste, 2 people who have always acted like they were born to host and born to judge. Every Thanksgiving, Easter, and graduation dinner is at their sprawling home with its immaculate landscaping and 3 dining tables, one for the kids, one for the young adults, and one for real adults. It's not subtle. I live about 40 minutes away in a small brick rental with a cracked walkway and a weedy garden I try to keep up. It's just me and my daughter, Lena. We don't have much, but our home is warm. It smells like cinnamon and old books. She fills it with drawings and questions and quiet joy. There's no pretending in our house. We're honest, even when it's messy. Lena's 9. She'll be 10 in a couple months, and somehow she already has the wisdom of someone much older. She's the kind of kid who listens more than she speaks, who observes everything, and who asks hard questions at bedtime. Questions like, why does Aunt Celeste always talk about her grandkids but never ask about me? I didn't have a good answer. I used to homeschool her full time, partly because of the pandemic, partly because she thrived in it. She's back in school now, but during those homeschool years, we discovered something amazing. She's gifted. Not in the showy TV movie kind of way. She's not out here doing calculus at 9, but she sees patterns, makes connections, and writes stories with emotional depth that sometimes stop me in my tracks. One night last spring, she wrote a short story about a little fox that was always last in line because its tail was too big. The fox kept trying to cut it off to fit in. But by the end, the fox realized that her tail was what helped her find her way home in the dark. When I finished reading it, I cried. Not because of the story, well, yes, the story too, but because I saw what Lena was doing. She was writing about me, and maybe a little about herself too. That was the moment I started looking into schools, real ones, special programs for kids who think differently, who don't get seen in regular classrooms. I found one that felt like a long shot, Wyndham Preparatory School, a private school with a focus on creative and analytical development for high-potential students. Tuition was way out of reach, but they offered a scholarship for students who scored high on their evaluations and submitted an outstanding portfolio. Lena's test results came back in the 98th percentile. Her writing portfolio brought the admissions director to tears. She emailed me personally to say so. And 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I found out Lena was accepted. We danced in the living room when the email came in. Lena asked if we could keep it a secret for a while, not because she was afraid, but because, as she put it, I kind of want to tell them myself. I didn't argue. She'd earned that moment. I told Uncle Raymond in a text, just out of politeness, thinking he might mention it. He didn't. I never heard a word from Aunt Celeste either. So when Thanksgiving rolled around, I packed our pie, put Lena in her yellow daisy dress, and reminded her we didn't need anyone's approval to feel proud of what she'd done. We got in the car. The sky was overcast, cold enough to see our breath. On the drive there, Lena held the acceptance letter in her lap. She didn't say much, just looked out the window, her hand resting over the school crest printed at the top of the page, like it meant more than gold. It did. Because for once, we weren't showing up small. We were showing up ready. We pulled into Uncle Raymond's driveway just after 3 p.m. The house was already packed, cars lined up on both sides of the cul-de-sac like every year. Same front door wreath, same giant inflatable turkey on the lawn, same feeling in my chest, like I'd swallowed a stone. Lena adjusted the yellow ribbon in her hair and looked up at me from the passenger seat. "Remember," I said, smiling gently, "you don't owe anyone anything today." She nodded. "I know, I just want to eat pie and see Grandma's old cat." That cat had died 3 years ago, but I didn't correct her. I was nervous too. Inside, it smelled like butter and spice, and something burnt someone was pretending wasn't burnt. The family noise hit us like a wave, people laughing too loud, hugging too hard, pretending too well. It was a show, and everyone had their role. Uncle Raymond was in the kitchen, wearing an apron over his button-down shirt like he'd cooked everything himself. He gave me a nod. No hug. No mention of Lena's acceptance letter. His wife, Aunt Marjorie, handed us drinks and ushered us to the dining room. Aunt Celeste arrived 10 minutes later, holding a stack of Christmas cards she had printed early. She passed them around the table like party favors. Her granddaughter, Ava's face was front and center, flashing a perfect toothy smile while holding up a gymnastics medal. "She's regional champ now," Celeste said, her voice dripping with pride. Honestly, we weren't surprised. I offered a polite smile. Lena quietly reached for a dinner roll. "Oh, and Miles got selected for cello ensemble again," Celeste added, tilting her glass of wine toward Uncle Raymond. "Only 2 third-graders in the district made it in." "You must be so proud," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We are," she replied, eyes scanning the table until they landed on Lena. "What about you, sweetheart? What are you working on? Still drawing your fantasy ponies?" Lena blinked. "They're wolves," she said, "but they light up." Celeste gave a little laugh, that syrupy kind that sounds almost kind, until you hear the edge underneath. "Well, that's just adorable. So creative. Kids need outlets, even if it's just coloring and playing pretend." I could feel Lena stiffen beside me. I gave her leg a gentle squeeze under the table. Dinner was served, and the conversation turned to schools. Bradley, Uncle Raymond's grandson, was being groomed for Ivy League. Eva was applying to pre-academy gymnastics in upstate New York. Even Miles, who was only in 3rd grade, had apparently tested above average in everything. "We just want to give them the best shot at success," Celeste said. "Some kids don't get that from the start, and it's really hard to recover later, you know?" I didn't respond. I chewed my sweet potatoes slowly, feeling each word like a flick to the back of the head. "Nina," Uncle Raymond called down the table, "how's that freelance editing thing going? Still doing romance novels?" "Mostly academic stuff now," I said. "Theses, dissertations, a few children's manuscripts." "Well, hey, as long as it pays the bills," he said, laughing and raising his wine glass. It was always like this. Comments that seemed harmless on the surface, but carried layers of judgment. I'd stopped rising to them years ago. Not because I agreed, but because arguing never changed anything. It just made me tired. But this time, I wasn't the only one listening. As we passed around dessert, pumpkin pie, pecan tart, chocolate cake, Celeste leaned toward me with that same condescending smile she'd used for years. "So what's Lena up to these days?" "Still homeschooling and writing her little stories?" "She's back in school," I said carefully. "And yes, she's still writing." "Well, it's good she has hobbies," she said. "Not every kid is cut out for the rigorous stuff. You know, Bradley had his first college prep workshop this fall. These days, if you're not pushing your kids early, they fall behind fast." I looked over at Lena. She hadn't touched her dessert. She was looking straight at Celeste, eyes narrowed, not with anger, but something quieter, like realization, like clarity. "It's a shame," Uncle Raymond chimed in. "Some kids, you can just tell they're not going to make it very far, just like some parents." And that was it. Lena pushed her chair back. The legs scraped the hardwood. Conversations at the table slowed. She stood up. "Actually," she said, voice clear and calm, "I'm the one who got accepted to Wyndham Prep, not Eva, not Bradley, me." The silence hit like thunder. You could hear a fork hit a plate. Everyone at the table froze, wine glasses mid-air, pie slices halfway lifted. My daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, was standing on her chair, not fidgeting, not looking to me for reassurance, just standing, back straight, chin up, hands by her sides. Her voice was small, but it cut through the noise like a pin dropping in a cathedral. "Actually," she said again, slowly this time, "I'm the one who got accepted to Wyndham Prep. Not Eva, not Bradley, me." Uncle Raymond blinked like someone had slapped him. Aunt Celeste's mouth opened, then closed, like she was chewing a thought she couldn't swallow. Lena looked right at them. No wobble, no giggle, no smugness either. Just truth. "They picked me for the creative scholarship," she said, still calm. "I got one of the top evaluation scores, and they said my story was one of the best submissions they've had in years." She reached into the little yellow purse she'd brought with her, a gift from my sister last Christmas, and pulled out the folded acceptance letter. It had been in there the whole time. She held it out across the table like a peace offering, but no one reached for it. That's when I found my voice. "She's telling the truth," I said, louder than I meant to. "She worked her heart out for it. Wyndham only picks 10 students nationwide for this program, and she made it." Still, no one moved. "Is this a joke?" Uncle Raymond finally said. His tone wasn't amused, just defensive. "Wyndham's no joke of a school. That's for gifted kids, for real top-tier achievers. And she is one," I said, meeting his stare. "You just never noticed because you were too busy making sure everyone knew how great your grandkids were." "Now, Nina," Aunt Celeste started, her voice all brittle silk. "I'm sure she's smart, but Wyndham? That's a stretch, even for—" "Why?" Lena asked suddenly, cutting her off. "Because I draw. Because I'm quiet. Because I don't talk about myself all the time? No one had an answer. You never ask me anything, she said, her voice trembling for the first time, not from fear, but something sharper. You talk about Ava's medals and Bradley's scores and Miles' cello solos, but not once. Not once. Have you asked me what I like or what I've been working on? It was in that moment I realized Lena hadn't just been listening all these years. She'd been watching, maybe measuring, waiting. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to explain herself, that she didn't need to make them understand because I did, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't my moment, it was hers. I didn't get into Wyndham because I'm anyone's niece or granddaughter, she said. I got in because I'm good at what I do, and I wanted to prove that even if no one in this family thinks I can do something big, I can still do it. The silence deepened. Aunt Celeste finally looked away. Uncle Raymond picked up his wine glass and sipped slowly, saying nothing. And by the way, Lena added, voice softer now, my story wasn't about fantasy wolves. It was about being different, and how that's okay. She stepped down from the chair, sat back in it, and calmly picked up her fork. The moment broke something open in the room. Not loudly, but like a slow crack across a glass surface. Nobody knew what to say, and for once, I didn't care if they did. I looked at Lena, sitting next to me, shoulders a little straighter than before. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You did good, I whispered. She smiled, small but proud. I realized in that moment that something had shifted, not just in the room, but inside me. I had spent years avoiding these confrontations, believing that silence was safer, that going along with their nonsense was easier than defending myself. But my daughter had just done what I never could. She had stood up, not just for herself, but for me too. And she hadn't done it with anger or cruelty. She'd done it with clarity, with grace. That chair might have been small, but standing on it, she felt 1,000 feet tall. The air felt different after Lena sat back down, heavier maybe, or just clearer. I could see Aunt Celeste staring into her glass of Pinot, probably wishing it were something stronger. Her mouth was tight, like she was still working out how she'd spin this later to her bridge club. Uncle Raymond leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to explode. His pride had taken a direct hit, and I knew it. I'd seen that look before, usually when someone dared to challenge him at the car dealership during a family tour or when the food at a restaurant didn't meet his 5-star standards. He wasn't used to being questioned. He was definitely not used to being corrected by a 9-year-old. But Lena didn't flinch. She just went back to eating her pie. Wyndham, he said finally, dragging out the word like it tasted bitter. That's that elite place out near the lake, right? Private, artsy, test scores through the roof? That's the one, I said, my tone even. He laughed once, dryly. Well, congratulations, I guess. That's, unexpected. Unexpected. The word bounced around in my chest. That's what they'd always thought of us. Unexpected, as in unqualified, lucky, out of place. It's not luck, I said, sharper than I meant to. She worked for this. She earned it. You all talk about achievement like it's a birthright, like being loud and ambitious makes you better. But sometimes the quiet ones do more with less. Sometimes they're the ones who surprise you. Across the table, Eva looked over at Lena with wide eyes. There wasn't any jealousy in her expression, just curiosity, like she was seeing her cousin for the first time. What's the story about? She asked Lena, nudging her dessert plate aside. Lena glanced at me, then turned to Eva. It's about a fox who thinks she has to change everything about herself to be accepted, she said. But in the end, she learns the things that made her different are the same things that help her save the others. There was a long pause. That's kinda cool, Eva said quietly. A few chairs down, Aunt Marjorie cleared her throat. Well, maybe it's a good thing we've got a writer in the family. I always said creativity runs deep on your side, Nina. That was generous of her, considering she'd once told me to let go of that whole dreamer phase and learn some Excel skills. But I nodded. Maybe it was the closest thing to a compliment I was going to get tonight. I looked at Celeste, waiting to see if she'd recover, repackage, regain control. She always did. But this time, she just took a long sip of wine and said nothing. It was almost disappointing. Not because I wanted more conflict, but because I realized how much energy I'd wasted bracing for it all these years. I'd been so afraid of their judgment that I'd forgotten they didn't hold as much power as I once believed. You know, I said to the whole table, for years I sat through dinners like this feeling like I didn't measure up, and I stayed quiet because I thought it was the only way to keep the peace. No one interrupted me. Even the kids at the far end of the table looked up. But peace isn't silence, I continued. It's respect, and I won't keep sitting through meals where people insult me or my daughter in the name of small talk. That landed hard. A few people shifted in their seats. Aunt Celeste finally opened her mouth. Nina, I didn't mean... You did, I said, not harshly, just factually. But it's okay. You don't have to mean something for it to hurt. You just have to be willing to learn. There was no grand apology, no teary confessions or hugs across the table, just a room full of people reckoning quietly with a version of me they hadn't expected, and with a little girl who was more than a sweet face and a quiet voice. As dessert wound down, conversations picked up again, but softer this time, less performative. For once, people actually listened. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder as I finished my coffee. "Was that okay?" she asked. "That was perfect," I whispered. And it was. Because for the first time, I wasn't shrinking to fit the room. The room had shifted around us. The next morning, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Lena was curled up on the couch with her sketchbook, drawing something with wings and antlers, a creature that looked fierce and gentle at the same time. I watched her for a while before I made coffee. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. We both knew something had shifted, inside us and around us. After Thanksgiving dinner, there wasn't a dramatic exit, no slammed doors or tearful speeches, just a quiet dispersal. People left in clumps, some giving awkward hugs, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Aunt Marjorie muttered something about big personalities as she wrapped up leftover turkey. Uncle Raymond disappeared into the living room and never came back to the table. Celeste didn't say goodbye to either of us, just walked out with her coat slung over her arm and her jaw clenched. It wasn't satisfying, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. When I checked my phone later that night, I had one text from Celeste. "Heard about Wyndham. Surprised, but good for her. Let's talk soon." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but out of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing approval you never needed to begin with. I know how stories like mine are usually told. The black sheep redeems herself, wins everyone over, becomes the unexpected hero at the family reunion. But that's not real life. In real life, you don't always get applause. You get clarity. And if you're lucky, you get yourself back. I used to think being the black sheep meant I was broken, like there was some part of me missing, a filter, a coat of polish, an instinct to fit in. But now I see it differently. Being the black sheep just means you saw the dysfunction before anyone else was willing to admit it. It means you said no. You broke the pattern. You left the flock. And if you're really lucky, like I was, it means you raise someone who sees your worth even when others don't. Lena didn't just stand up for herself at that dinner table. She stood up for me, for the version of me that was still quietly holding her breath every time someone made a joke with my name in it, for the younger version of me who once believed I had to be small to stay safe, for every time I bit my tongue just to make it through another gathering. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't insult anyone. She just spoke the truth. And in doing so, she gave me permission to start speaking mine. In the days after Thanksgiving, I noticed small things changing. My cousin Rachel texted to ask if Lena could help her daughter with a school writing project. Aunt Marjorie mailed us a thank you card and slipped in a note. "Your daughter has a quiet strength. She gets that from you." Even Eva emailed Lena a photo of her latest medal with a message that said, "I think your Fox story was cooler than this." Not everyone changed. Not everyone reached out. But I stopped needing them to. The most powerful thing I've learned through all this is that validation doesn't need to be unanimous. You don't need a round of applause to know you did the right thing. Sometimes all you need is to sit beside your kid the morning after something hard, watching her draw creatures with glowing eyes, knowing you gave her the kind of love and space that let her become brave in the first place. I don't know what the next holiday gathering will look like. Maybe we'll go, maybe we won't. Maybe they'll ask about Wyndham next time, or maybe they'll pretend it never happened. But what I do know is this: I'll never sit in silence again just to make other people comfortable. And Lena won't either. Because we don't owe anyone our quiet anymore. We owe each other truth, pride, joy, and the freedom to take up space in rooms that were never built for us. I used to flinch when someone called me the black sheep. Now I wear it like a badge, because black sheep aren't weak. They're just not afraid to walk their own path. And sometimes they raise the kind of girl who isn't afraid to stand on a chair and tell the truth when it matters most. So if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, or let someone else's version of you define your worth, I hope this story reminded you that sometimes standing up doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be true. And if it did something for you, if it made you feel seen or less alone, please like the video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me your story. I read everyone. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories just like this. Stories that speak to the quiet fighters, the kind rebels, and the black sheep who finally found their voice. Thanks for being here. Until next time.